Ever been curious about the reproduction Heywood Wakefield stain? Well, if you have, stick around because I'm about to show you. A little backstory on this table. I saw it posted on Facebook Marketplace for $50. I knew immediately that it was a Heywood Wakefield table. I offered the seller $40, they accepted, and I went and picked it up within the hour. I knew that I eventually wanted to get the reproduction stain, but I had to hold off for a bit because it's really expensive. So in the meantime, I had sanded all the old paint off and just put a couple of coats of clear shellac on it so that I could still utilize the table. 6 months later, I was finally able to purchase it. I ordered it from werefinish.net. It was $70 for a quart plus $15 shipping, so $85 total. It comes in both champagne and wheat. I chose to get the champagne. It came extremely well packaged with step-by-step detailed instructions and shipped out within about 3 days. So the first thing I did, of course, was to separate all of the pieces so it was easier for me to remove the finish and sand. I used my carbide scraper to remove the bulk of the shellac before I had done any sanding. The directions say when you're sanding to use between 120 and 180 grit sandpaper. I had 120, so that's what I used. I used my orbital sander with a foam pad on it to go around the round edges, and I also did some hand sanding. When I bought this table, it was missing a chunk out of one of the legs, and I had done a small repair on it, but I decided to remove that and do it again with some wood epoxy putty. And when it was dry, I went and sanded it down so that it matched the rest of the leg. And now to the fun part. So just like any stain, you want to make sure that it's thoroughly mixed so that all of the color that has settled on the bottom is dispersed throughout and you get a nice even finish. This stain is non-toxic and it's water-based, and they suggest putting it in a Tupperware container while you're working with it because it does evaporate rather quickly. So if it's in the Tupperware container, you can just pop the lid on when it's not in use. The directions say to apply it with a staining pad generously and wipe it off immediately. Make sure you work in small manageable sections because this stain does dry really fast. If it does start to dry on you before you can remove it, you can simply recoat it with wet stain or use a rag dampened with water to remove the stain as well. I will say, however, this is some of the easiest stain I have ever worked with. I was a little nervous at first to use this just because of how quickly they said it dried, but I did this in my garage with the doors closed when it was like 65 or 70 out, and I thought the drying time was fine. I had plenty of time to apply it and wipe it off with my rag, and I didn't have any issues with streakiness or blotchiness. There was also really no strange smell to it, and the cleanup was extremely easy. They do say to let the stain dry for no less than 6 hours. I chose to just let mine dry overnight. You can apply a top coat over the first stain, or if you want it a little bit darker and more opaque, you can apply a second coat. I chose to do a second coat because I wanted mine a little bit more richer in color. I did notice after the first coat that the grain had raised, so when the second coat was dry, I took some 220 grit sandpaper and just smoothed that out. There was no information in the instructions or in the YouTube videos on whether or not you should use pre-stain, so I didn't use it because I didn't want to screw anything up, but I think next time I'm going to use it. So the company says that you can basically put any top coat on it that you want. They do suggest a clear satin varnish, so I'm using water-based polyurethane by Bear & Satin because that's what I had on hand. They do have their own varnish that you can purchase. You can get a package deal with whatever stain color you choose plus the varnish, and that's $130 and $15 in shipping, or you can purchase the varnish on its own. Their varnish is slightly amber in color, and what it's supposed to do is mimic the Heywood Wakefield furniture that we see today. As Heywood Wakefield furniture aged, it became slightly yellow in color, and that's what we typically see today when we look at it. So if that's the look that you're going for, I definitely would suggest getting the varnish. If not, the clear coat looks just as good. Another thing it did say that you can do with this stain is if you didn't achieve the opaqueness that you did with just the stain alone, you can actually add a little bit of that stain into your clear coat. I ended up applying 3 coats because I wanted to make sure that I had extra protection on it because this table is going to be used, and I sanded in between each coat. And then the final thing that I had to do was color match my repair. So what are my final thoughts on the stain? Well, I loved it. It's extremely user-friendly, it's non-toxic, it comes well packaged, there's step-by-step detailed instructions, and there's even YouTube videos that you can go watch if you're more of a visual person as opposed to reading something. There's only a couple of downsides that I can see with this stain. One is if you have a question, there's no customer service that you can reach out to. You either have to go on their website to their frequently asked questions and answers, or go to their YouTube videos. And the second would probably have to be the cost. This stuff is definitely not cheap, but after using it and seeing the results that I got, I think it's well worth it. It's also made by a small business, which makes it even better. And they also guarantee that every single bottle, whether you buy it now or 5 years from now, is going to be the same exact color. And this is how it turned out. I am absolutely obsessed with this table now. I'm glad that I purchased this stain. It came out exactly how I wanted it to, and the color is fantastic. I hope this video helped you out if you were ever curious in purchasing this stain, and if you want to see more furniture flips and tips, then subscribe to my channel.